There's someone at the very back. Yes.
I have a prepared statement. I used to be on the cable advisory board, just so you know. The mayor dismissed me largely because, well, I'll talk about some of the ideas. But
Could you identify, give your name, please?
My name's Joel Saxe, and I'm a media producer, a long-term media educator. Been teaching film and video for over 15 years. Got my start in cable at ACTV in the early 80s and have been involved with community access in Amherst, in Springfield, SCN, Springfield Community Network, in Greenfield, and witnessed it in other places in Northampton as well. The specific reason the mayor told me that she dismissed me was because, among other things, I was advocating there be synergy, that Valley Free Radio, that there be a joint studio between Valley Free Radio and Northampton Community TV, that they be in a shared space so that something like Democracy Now! We could have here in Northampton, that all the activity that Valley Free Radio has generated, they have several dozen people at their meetings, a tremendous base of people, that we could essentially create Democracy Now! In Western Mass by having a joint studio. The mayor didn't want any of that to be talked about in the agreement. So I just want you all to know that I'm concerned that hearings like this could just be a kind of requirement that they have to go through. My experience with the mayor, what she told me, is that she knows what she wants. She wants a good cable access facility, which I support, and she wants the INET connection. And that's what she wants. And she's the one who's going into these negotiations. So I think this issue about what the citizens want is crucial. And if people want to do more than that, I think we need some kind of committee in town, Northampton Committee for Media Democracy or something like that, that's going to stay on this issue. I do support a wider community access facility, and I hope that that's something we get. The position that I want to take, which folks on the committee have heard before and have been very closed to thinking about, but this idea that we can expand our vision of what is TV and what, it's not just about the community access station we're talking about. What I want to put on the table is all the other 500 channels of dread, or whatever it is, the other 500 channels that are reproducing the same old, and the possibility that it could be different than that. There was a time when the world was flat and people thought it could be different. There was a time where women and people of color were mistreated and people said, no, things have to change. And we have an opportunity here to negotiate with a global corporation. The monopoly status of cable TV, allowing each town to negotiate with a global corporation, offers us the potential to advance a local, regional, and national vision of what a democratic media landscape could be. There's tremendous political value challenging Comcast not only to share a larger percentage of its growing profits, but also to demand changes in what has come to be accepted as the way it is in terms of the total commercialization of TV. With the 400+ stations Comcast purchases with our money, what do we get back in terms of representing the stories of the people of our town and region? It has come to be accepted as the way it is that the corporate media for which we pay is completely bereft of ongoing reportage, investigation, fiction, and folly that comes from the tremendous insights, voices, and creative capacities in our communities. And I can't emphasize this enough. It's so interesting how we've all come to accept we don't have representation of Northampton. We don't have representation of Springfield. We don't have representation of Holyoke. We don't know about the people in our lives. We have all these stations for which we pay. We're paying, whether it's in the cable fees we pay or the substantial cost of marketing, advertising that's built into every product we buy. So 40 to 60% of the cost of a box of cereal is the marketing, is the advertising. We pay entirely for TV. And what do we get? What do we get? That's the question. And what are we able to stand for as we begin to negotiate with a global corporation? Let's use this cable contract negotiation to press the mayor to challenge Comcast to begin talks with the media giants from which it buys programming to fund a much wider range of indie media stations at the same rate they fund CNN, Fox News, MTV, etc. Why shouldn't we have a 24-hour Democracy Now! Cable news network positioned between Fox and CNN? What about several youth indie media stations, regional, national, global, between MTV and VH1? What about having funding for young people in Springfield, for young people in Holyoke, to create ongoing reportage about what's going on in their town? We're paying for this. Springfield does not have a public access station. So you figure the number of people in Springfield who are paying for cable, and there is absolutely no public access station in that town. As major religions follow a practice of giving a fair percentage of their wealth to those in need, why not a corporate media tithing of 10% or more of annual profits to an indie media initiative operating on local, regional, and national levels? Since Congress and the FCC have completely abrogated their legal obligation to protect the airwaves as a public trust, it's up to us to address our demands for media democracy directly to Comcast, MTV, Viacom, GE, NBC, Disney, ABC, Fox, Time Warner, the Big Five, and all the rest quite directly. We've had a system now where the marketplace will set you free. They're cutting kind of the involvement of government in the state. So if the government is pulling out, if we have less and less funding for public TV, for documentary filmmakers, which is the case, then maybe we need to develop a strategy of pushing up directly against corporate America to share the wealth. And that's something for us to think about. And there's no reason that in this town, with all these liberal people and all these academics and these two major national media advocacy organizations, Free Press and the Media Education Foundation, we could not spearhead if we care about these issues. There's no reason we can't take this stance in negotiating with the Comcast. Sure, the mayor doesn't want to mess things up. But there's no reason we could not take this stance. And I guarantee you, you talk to your lawyers, there's nothing in any contract that says we cannot ask the corporation to begin negotiating with the people from which it buys programming to share the wealth. I ask you to ask your lawyers whether there's anything at all that says you can't. We're not talking about content here. We're talking about tithing. Justice. That this money, which is our money to begin with, should be shared in a more equitable way. And are we really willing to take that up? I want to talk particularly about racism in MTV and our obligation thereof. Growing up as a Jewish person, I grew up with a mind, and this is something I say in every class that I teach, when I'm lecturing on some of the subjects that I'm working on as a filmmaker, as a media artist, installation artist. We've grown up with a mantra in relation to the Holocaust: never again. We live in a society that is incredibly divided and becoming more so, that is incredibly segregated, right? We still have racism like we've never had before in this country. And what is our obligation to that? And what is the obligation of the media, of Comcast and the Big Five from which it buys programming, to that fundamental issue? Over 12% of young black men ages 24 to 29 are in prison, primarily for drug crimes where whites go free. On the other hand, black rap culture, an expressive idiom rooted in the experience of young black men hardened by poverty, violence, gangs, and prison, is the center of a swirl of multi-billion-dollar entertainment industries. The appropriation of this resistive outpouring has been turned into saleable commodities. Yet for all the profits made off the rebellious stylistic punch of young black men's culture, what have they received? Has any of this money been returned to these communities? What does MTV do to represent the real causes of the hardship of young people of color? With over 1 in 10 young black men in prison and ever-widening poverty, should this not be a #1 priority of media inquiry for a network that's supposed to be serving the interests of young folks? So what do we have in terms of representation of these issues on TV? Given all the money, rap hip-hop culture has become the center of youth culture in many ways, and is used to sell so many products. And what goes back, and what do we really have in terms of representing these situations honestly in a city like Springfield, where there's tremendous crime and violence? And what does Channel 22, Channel 2040, guided in its news by the maxim, if it bleeds, it leads, total little sound bites, what have we ever really seen in terms of real representation on an ongoing basis? It's amazing what we've come to accept as the way it is in terms of TV.
Could I just, we had sort of a 3-minute.
There have been people who have gotten up here and gone off, so I want to just finish my statement, okay?
Fine.
Please.
I'd like to hear him too.
I was on this commission. They put me off because of these ideas. There are several people here who threatened to resign because I came to this meeting and said ideas like that. Okay? So this is what we've got when you want to say something else about thinking larger than the box. As Comcast is the portal for the TV programming we purchase, why can't we raise the demand that this issue of racist incarceration be made top priority in funding youth media and education projects to be generously sponsored and distributed by all major networks? There's a whiteout by corporate America on the real hardships facing more and more Americans across the color spectrum. Instead, we are fed a drumbeat of incessant, deafening commercial noise that seems to be dumbing our nation into obedience, trying through mindless consumption to quell our growing fears, depression, and distress caused by a vicious economy. Let's get radical to the roots and put this at the top of our demands, the issue of racist incarceration and the way Black America, people of color, are being treated in this country. Why can't we put this at the top of our demands in terms of what should be represented on TV? When Mayor Claire sits at the table with Comcast, some may talk about dismantling racism and honoring the lives of Dr. King and Sojourner Truth. But if we continue to follow a parochial stance, viewing this negotiation with a major global corporation as getting the best for our sweet little white and bright gentrifying paradise, we turn our backs on our neighbors who are under siege by an economy driven by the cutthroat ethics of Comcastable suits. Hannah Arendt discusses the banality of evil in terms of citizens who witness systematic oppression of others, yet remain silent and thus complicit. TV is the channel in our society through which such diverse information, dialogue, and testimony should be heard 24 hours a day, every 10 stations, or thereof. What about the 12% of young Black men who are quietly twisting slowly in the wind in terms of talking about genocide? What do you have to actually execute people? And that's kind of the question that's on the table here. What is the obligation? We can sell rap. We can sell hip-hop culture. We can talk about Martin Luther King and have statues to Sojourner Truth. But what is our commitment? And can we raise these issues? What's wrong with Mayor Claire saying this to the citizens of Northampton, to Comcast, to the nation, to step outside the box? What's wrong with you folks taking a position like this? We're dealing with a corporation that has screwed us for the past 10 years. If you hire a plumber to do a job, but the faucets don't work right, and the water coming in is full of cultural carcinogens that poison our children, you don't hire them back, at least not without serious demands that they rectify their errors. Taking on Comcast is the portal for the corporate gloss and legal stealth that is digging an ever-widening divide between the rich and everyone else is equivalent to Martin Luther King's Freedom March, the lunch counter sit-ins, and Malcolm X's calls for by any means necessary. To continue to follow a slave-colonized mentality in relation to the corporate cultural portal that is ripping our communities is to accept a systematic malaise that will only worsen. I guarantee you that if the Cable Advisory Board and the mayor call on the citizens of Northampton and Western Massachusetts to envision and stand up for a democratic media landscape, we will enthusiastically support you. When under siege, you either step up the fight back or retreat and capitulate. Many citizens in communities across the nation are outraged by corporate America's ripoff, yet don't know what to do. Anger turned inward becomes hopelessness, despair, and depression. We need leaders to speak truth to power, and this potential power at the negotiating table comes not through legal wrangling, but from an outraged citizenry demanding economic justice through media democracy. I have no delusions we will achieve such visioning by ourselves, but advance this strategy to strike sparks towards other communities in Western Massachusetts and beyond, to push the envelope towards realizing the tremendous potential of a democratized media landscape. Indeed, I believe one of the recommendations we should make to the mayor and follow in our own advocacy is the need to bargain as regional and national entities as consumers united for media democracy. It's our money that pays for TV. Let's demand something beyond a totally commercialized landscape. This contract negotiation offers a striking opportunity to wage a critical battle against corporate globalization and its media oligopoly from the streets of our hometown. And I have a petition and a series of 5 demands that are on the back, and if anybody wants a copy of these, they're right here. So, any comments? Any questions?
Are you going to submit that to us as part of the public record?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. I'd like to make a correction. There is a cable access in Springfield. It's very active.
Can you tell me more about that? Because it's not something that people in town know about.
One channel is channel 13 on the Springfield cable system. I'm not sure if they have 3 or 4, but I think they have 4 channels.
And how does it actually work? Do they have workshops? Do they train people?
There's a guy there named Zachary Reynolds who works for Comcast that you can talk to. He's the public
Do you know
access.
whether they have trainings?
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
Because what I've seen is very little. Yeah, there's a minor access station, but it's nothing like it was. And from what I know, there's very, very little provision in the community. People don't even know about it. People I talk to at Springfield College, at Stick, at the Dunbar Center, at Gandhar Mental Health Institution, at the community health centers. Nobody knows about community access in Springfield.
Well, I think that's a problem in a lot of communities, that people don't realize it's there, and it's there for them. And I think more publicity needs to go out about that, because that's a problem across the board, I think.